Greetings, everyone, and welcome once more. It is I, Tentis your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and the spookiest of months, Spooktober, continues with more interesting tabletop topics that are just a little creepy, just a little spooky, and, well, dive into some very dark places. And today is no exception. We're going to be talking about insect spirits, the Hive, that infest and change and corrupt and, well, you just aren't yourself anymore until a gigantic bug monster kind of bursts out of your body and becomes you. You become the spirit. We'll talk about it. But they are a very interesting threat, monster, that exists within the Shadowrun world that is perhaps underutilized. Maybe because it's not really a Shadowrunner's job to take care of these things. Maybe it's because, well, a little horror isn't always needed in something like a sci-fantasy. There are some adventures and books that deal with it, and we'll talk about it. But it's just interesting. So, let's talk about what sources we're using and where we're using them at, and I'm going to be using three main sources that I'm going to give you information from today, including two of the books, because, honestly, I felt like the Shadowrun Wikipedia didn't have enough for me. Sometimes it has enough for me to give a basic outline of information, especially when I was doing stuff like the country guides and stuff like that. But in this case, no, I felt like it needed a little bit more. This one, because it's much smaller. So these are small images, so apologize. You get an idea of the names of these things as I'm reading them off. So, let's talk about the books that we use. And I will mention that the two books that I am using are this one, Bug City, which talks about Chicago when it was infested. And that's a bigger version of it. You can kind of do the bigger version. And it's also the Japanese cover, because it's the one I could find a nice picture of. Street Magic. Street Magic is a very good one from 4th edition that goes into pretty good depths about it, and 4th edition is very compatible with 5th edition. 6th edition you'd have to adapt things, but at least it's in the right ballpark. Other books you can check out is Magic in the Shadows, The Grimoire, Threats, and of course Threats 2. For some other sources that I can count out here, there is the Shadowrun novel Into the Shadows, which does deal with insect spirits. So if you want to read up on it, this is a novel, and most of the stuff in the books tend to be canon-ish. So go with a grain of salt. It's mostly canon, the novel versions of things. Also, the Earth Dawn book, Game Master's Compendium, actually does mention some stuff related to their version of insect spirits. So, if you want to look at the older version of it to get some more information on basically them, that's a place to go to. And then finally, Sacrificial Lamb. Look at this nice image here of a queen insect spirit doing its thing. Before we dive into it. So yes, my main sources today, of course, the White Wolf Wikipedia, just under insect spirits, and then I'll be referencing Bug City and Street Magic. So if you want to follow along and see things, that is the places to go to for information. Now, let's talk about insect spirits. So, the thing about insect spirits is that they are infested. They are cult leaders, too, in a way. That's the best way to say it, because there's insect spirits and insect shamans, and they do work together. There is this, I'll read the quote here from Harlequin, which they do have in the Wikipedia. Harlequin being the immortal elf, dealt with horrors, a big character in the Shadowrun world. I've talked about maybe doing an old video on that guy at some point in time. They set up a shop in every major city, create a major marketing campaign, and then begin aggressively recruiting dropouts, the disaffected, the deranged, just like any good cult. And that's the thing. They infest, they promise things, they do stuff. These, groups that seem to be for the disenfranchised, the downtrodden, those that need help, things like the homeless, assistant groups that were popping up in a lot of cities insect spirits, or insect shamans were behind them. Insect spirits are also known as Inave. They're a magical spirit, like any other spirit that you can summon. They caused Chicago to become Bug City in 2055. A insect shaman summons them. To do that, they need a living host, human or otherwise. They must invest one. There are two groups of insect spirits, and I'll dive into the groups. The social and solitary. The social are ant spirits, termite spirits, wasp spirits, fly spirits, firefly spirits. The solitary are roach, cicada, mantis, beetle, and mosquito. I will talk about a little bit farther on them because they dive into them a lot better in the Street Magic book. So when I'm using that as my reference point, we'll talk about that in the future. So let's talk about the origins as they are connected to, honestly, Earth Dawn a little bit too, and the way that they're described by characters. So, when the barrier between planes becomes thinner, it begins to thin away. Lorfar the dragon said he witnessed this kind of thing happening 9,000 years ago. Insect spirits basically reach out to the minds of various shamans, manipulate them, offering them power in exchange for a ritual to summon more of their kind to the physical world. This changes the shaman to an insect shaman. The shaman takes the insect spirit as a totem. They decline into madness and lose their humanity. It's effectively this entire idea that the insect spirits are looking for weak points in our world to invade, and they start by shaman. Someone who's diving into the metaphysical, the planes already. Their minds are open, their powers are good. Great to start the infestation. Just one. Once that mind is broken to them, call of power, then their kind can begin to evade. The Neve term was for insect spirits in the Fourth World, in Earth Dawn's world. It was the sign of the Scourge coming, the coming of the Harves. Their first appearance was the human kingdom of Landis, 2 centuries before the founding of Thera. You'd have to look into Earth Dawn history. We're not getting into that today. It caused a conflict known as the Neve Burnings, panic of possessed people resulting in indiscriminate massacres. Basically, if anyone's suspected to be affected or possessed by these spirits, trying to eradicate them. So, in a society that was a lot less able to tell these things and was a lot more medieval, they just slaughtered each other, suspecting it. A magician may not normally travel to a metaplane where there are insect spirits, also known as Nave. These Inave, the spirits, refer to them as crowded. Otherwise, there's not really a lot known there. So the psyche of their shamans that have been infested by insect spirits become more and more perverted and influenced over time. A compulsion to summon more spirits occurs. And unlike your average spirit summoning, an insect spirit needs a host. They gestate in a cocoon for a time. The spirit's astral presence physically changes the host. The spirit's body and mind warp that of the host, destroying the host's spirit, even if if the process is halted before they are completely merged. So, as soon as the process kind of begins, the person that they were dies horribly. Their spirit dies. What's left of their mind and body becoming corrupted, and a version of the insect spirit. So, when an insect shaman starts looking to start a new hive or nest, they summon a great spirit of the spirit type they are aligned with. They are a queen or a mother of the hive or nest, and they are responsible for basically controlling the lesser hosts and making lesser ranks. Your average host is unfortunately involuntary. There are horrible side effects that come with being infested by such a spirit. most creatures that are infested end up as half spirit, half host hybrids known as flesh forms. We'll talk a little bit more about them. They have traits of the spirit type: mandible, bestial wings, extra limbs, insectoid eyes. They're slaves to the hive mind. A small percentage of those that are infested become true form spirits. The host is killed, and basically a perfect insect spirit is birthed on the astral plane. It is immune to advances that would normally force it to retreat to the metaplane soon after. These are warriors of their hive or nest. There are few possessions that have almost no mutations at all. The metahuman body remains intact while under control of the possessed spirit. These good mergers are infiltrators, spies, and assassins. So, let's discuss a number of places insect spirits have shown up. This is a little insect spirit token from the Shadowrun Returns game, and we learned some truths there. And that's actually one of the sources we'll talk about. But Into the Shadows has mantid spirits. In 2050, Brandon Cross investigated the circle of mantid spirits, whose all hosts had graduated from Marine Hills Academy, class 2039. Queen Euphoria, which involves Dunkelzin's will, which that's another adventure that kind of deals with them a little bit. Simstar of Euphoria, Amanda Larkart, basically died when a insect shaman attempted to invest her with a Queen's Insect Spirit 2050. And the sim recording of her rescue against the Hive Masters is a classic. In 2057, Dunkelzin's will had basically 80,000 new yen left to Miss Leslie Lockhart, Amanda's daughter, to use for her care and schooling, plus copies of all her mother's sims. It's assumed that Euphoria had a child as a teenager because she died at 21 in 2050, and Leslie was at least 7 years old in 2057. And also in the will, Dunkelzin puts a bounty for the capture of insect shamans. So if you want to deal with the will and get some extra money, go take care of an insect shaman. In Shadowrun Returns, the video game, insect spirits were summoned by Jessica Watts, who is the insect shaman of the Universal Brotherhood, and is the main antagonist of Shadowrun's Returns. The insect spirits emerge from their hive in the Universal Brotherhood building, just as you learn that Jessica is the mastermind behind Sam Swass assassinations. So, yeah. In the end of the game, the protagonist stops Jessica and all the actions, and the government becomes aware of the insect spirit's existence and of its existence. So. Doubled exposure in 2055. The Universal Brotherhood and Renrat Group take advantage of homeless in Project Hope. There was election meddling in the 2057 adventure Dead Run in Shadows of the Underworld. And the previous 2057 adventure Cows of War in Super Tuesday. The election and suborbital events of General Yates is tied up with an organization known as the Power Coalition, the Bug City Containment Zone, and Manta Spirits. And there's Secret Hive, Universal Brotherhood, and more, and Wasp Spirits. And Ares macro technology has moves several captured Queen Spirits and Insect Shamans to Complex 68G in the Algonquin Manitou Council for study. The Insect Shamans are brainwashed to be loyal to Ares, and this is 2056. Ares launches Operation Extermination using FB strain Delta to exterminate spirits in Chicago Containment Zones in 2058. In 2062, they begin using paranormal animal flesh-formed insect spirits in Complex 68G to guard facilities. It's unknown whether they're fully in control of these bugs. But basically, Ares is fucking around with insect spirits. Great plan. And then Andragete, Donald Arteliker Fasuli, in 2063, basically unknown to the Mafia and the world at large, Donna Allegro Fusili is infested with a powerful wasp queen spirit. And a full quarter of Nagrata was converted to Hive. To the Hive. And that was an Italian mafia in southwestern Italy. Also in Hong Kong, 2064, under mine tunnels of Sui Wan, in the Hong Kong Free Enterprise Zone, were infested with ant and beetle hives. And the last mention of them that I can give out here, in Nicholas Aurelius II, on September 5th, 2074. He's the grandson to the founding member of Ares, threw himself from a Gulf jet stream en route to Detroit. It's believed in the shadows it was responsible for pursuing wasp spirits. So there's a lot of references to like adventures and stories that were told that involve insect spirits. So keep in mind these are just examples to be used. So that's some interesting information on insect spirit stuff. Now, hey, here's the cover of Bug City. Let's talk about Bug City. Why not? So, what's the difference between hives and nest? Well, the social insect spirits create hives. It's a place full of dozens, scores, even hundreds of bugs. They support only one queen, but the type of insect spirit, the goal of the hive, sometimes does require more queen spirits. There are times when other different types of bugs cooperate and coexist within one hive. It's rumored that the 2 super hives that were in Chicago contain multiple types of spirits. And again, with doing with the Universal Brotherhood. Nests, on the other end, are for the more solitary units, the mosquitoes, roaches, and the likes, and they're formed to breed. It has usually one or more females, usually all the same type. Like the beetles and ants can sometimes get along and stuff like that, but the females protect the cocoons from invaders, and bugs that fulfill other roles also provide protection. The other bugs in the group transport food to the nest for breeding females, which rarely for safety. A nest could contain more females, doesn't happen very often. There are also loners, which are very unique solitary bugs. Those are mantises. They don't have a hive or a nest. They sometimes have little cabals, which are usually a dominant female and her assistants. And then when we talk about, well, cocoons, they use the cocoons to produce their new forms. So, whoever you are, when you're a person, you're chosen to be a host for an insect spirit. You get cocooned. And then it summons a new spirit into your body. The time it takes to summon the spirit and to incubate time to birth varies from various types of insect spirits, from bug to bug. And this is the most vulnerable stage for an insect spirit. If you find a cocoon, you can destroy them. So the spirit joins the host body, and the spirit of the cocoon is a matter akin to egg laying. Usually the mother or queen mounts the host body and invests with this new spirit. They don't actually have to physically penetrate the body, except for wasps and mosquitoes, which do that. But the summoning requires that position. And it's apparently, if you ever watch it, it's very obscene, horrible kind of thing that happens, you know? You're basically getting, like, giant, monstrous insect birthing an egg into your cocoon body then. So, let's talk a little bit more about the true forms and the flesh forms. So the true form is basically a spirit. It's about human-sized equivalent of a terrestrial insect, with some variation. So, like, an ant spirit will look like a human-sized ant. Wasp spirit, a human-sized ant. Or a human-sized wasp, sorry. But again, depending on abilities and different things like that, there could be differences in their forms. So, bug spirit used this physical body of a person, emerge from it to create an astral body. And it can still do the thing that all spirits can do once they've been summoned. Go fully astral or assume a physical form. You know, These are smarter than your average bug spirit would be, or something of the flesh forms. They're very fast in either spirit or physical form. And they're basically like fighting a spirit, except caked up on insect power. You know, that's maybe the great way to say it, but it's just the idea that they have, you know, a form that's probably much better suited towards combat than your average spirit. And they are not against using it because they're right there with you. Flesh forms, as I kind of talked about, they have a lot less... They're basically more human speed. They don't have a lot of intelligence in comparison to it. In the case of, like, Hives, that's saying a lot. There are those that I talked about that could use heavy layers of clothing, other types of disguises. You know, some bug shamans do have spells to have flesh forms conceal their appearance. The body, mind, soul, swallowed by the insect spirits, and whatever life was in there is snuffed out, basically. That's what happens. Now, we could go into... I'll just make sure to, like, split between the two books here, but I'll switch over to Street Magic book here thing. That's a nice beetle man. He enjoys his existence. We'll talk about the types in a second here. But let's talk about insect shamans a little bit more and their mentorship and things like that before we go into the specific insects. So, I talked about the seduction that they have. And the thing is, your average shaman is probably not going to listen to an insect spirit. They seek out those that are alone, eccentric, antisocial, that maybe have problems themselves, that they can live... There are people that fall to temptation, and they know how to prey upon these people. It's a seductive call, basically. It's usually suspected that the insects are the ones that initiate contact very covertly, and basically they establish this and kind of test to see these shamans' abilities. Yeah, kind of almost like the idea of demons and stuff a lot of times. There is times, though, that is possible that a shaman could seek power and turn towards an insect spirit. That's not impossible. Horrors are probably the closest thing, and they cannot exist within the Shadowrun world yet. But if you look into what horrors are, they are basically akin to like a demon or a devil in Earth Dawn. And Earth Dawn's taking place at the tail end of when horrors were able to exist in the world. So magic is being, like, drawn back. It's basically disappearing. Because in this universe, magic ebbs and flows. So, like, this is the tail end. There's barely enough magic for horrors to exist in the world, so most of them have disappeared. There's a few that are more strong or found ways to exist within their kind of dying off. And then things disappeared. And then we had the fifth world that was in between there. And there's the sixth world where magic's returned again. So this is like, there will be an uptick to it. But that's things like where the great dragons and the immortal elves are actually doing things because they can see that technology combined with because magical ability on its own were not enough to defeat horrors. They're hoping, like Harlequin and stuff, to develop meta-humanity to a point in time where the combination of technology and magic are enough to fight off the horrors and to basically protect the world. That's the idea now. Just as a little insert there. These are creatures from deeper planes of existence that would... The insect spirits are you're getting deeper into those planes. As you get deeper into the astral planes and the places beyond the magical bits of reality, you get into darker places. They're not all dark and evil places, but usually the places that are pretty terrible are the ones that want to come to our world. And insect spirits are a good example of the, like, first wave of that kind of thing, of the darker places within the metaverse where they want to begin infesting the world. So, like other magicians, insect shamans are able to summon 5 spirit types. They don't have anything in common with your average spirit types. They represent functional archetypes and castes for their insect spirit, basically. They appear as giant insects astrally, reflect the nature of the insect type and spirits. They are bound by service to the shaman until they inhabit a vessel. And from then on, once they have a vessel, they show their summoner unwavering loyalty and obedience. They offer their queen or mother, at least until the queen or mother commands them to shift loyalties. So that's the idea, is that, like, they are summoning the spirit. The spirit can't really exist in the world the same way. It needs this host. So they kind of bring it forth, get a host, and once it's there, it's loyal until the head of the nest or hive basically commands it not to be loyal. But it shows that same unity. So, in the 4th edition book Street Magic, you can see the insect tradition. The combat spirits would be soldiers, detection scouts, health caretakers, illusion nymph, manipulation worker. Those are your 5 types, combining with the 5 types of magic. So each insect spirit is a different type, and they do have different abilities and motivations. That's an important thing to say about the insect spirits, too. Each one is very different. You kind of classify them because they do function very similar. They are, appearance-wise, similar to terrestrial insects we have. They have a very similar ability of how they basically procreate, the idea that they want to spread into our world, but beyond that, there is difference. And there are some characteristics that split between them. Like, ants will reflect all ant genera, leafcutters, army ants. So each one kind of represents all of their kind of things, collectively, a little bit. An insect mentor spirit bestows no special advantage or disadvantage on their shamans, but it tutors them in the way of insect magic. Basically, that's what they want to get into, the mentor spirit position. Once an insect population reaches a critical mass, the shaman then can invoke a queen or mother from a nymph spirit. The newborn queen or mother becomes the avatar of the mentor spirit then. So, you know, then we have the communal and solitary existence, which we split apart a little bit. So, yes. I probably should talk about advances a little bit, because I did mention it. Basically, extraplanar entities suffer a phenomenon known as advances, which is fading. Is a fading of form and force if they remain on Earth's astral space. There are those beings that have learned to counter this dissipation by anchoring their astral forms to the physical plane, use of inhabitation, possession. Basically, like, extraplanar creatures that are beyond something like your average spirit fade away naturally. That's why insect spirits have to infest the way they do, because they avoid advances like that. Otherwise, they would just deteriorate very rapidly. They're not meant to be in our sphere of existence. Yeah. And we've heard tales of various facilities used to prepare a host body. Yep. Inhabit it and change it. Always so pleasant. Always so very, very, very pleasant. But let's talk about the different types of insect spirits. That's another image from Shadowrun Returns. Let's use that one when we talk about the types here. Ants. They're highly social and cooperative, exceptionally well within a single hive. There's workers, scouts, soldiers, along with a small number of caretakers and nymphs. Distinguished by their color. They're builders, constructing complex warrens with multiple levels, with no apparent logic by human standards. They're often below ground in areas that either have been excavated or heavily modified. They've got territorial instincts that does lead them to rivalries between hives. They rarely work alone. The queen or their shaman usually sends them out to objectives in mass. When subtlety is called for, provided the shaman can convince the queen rolling out the army would do more harm than good, they work in small groups of 2 to 4 individuals. And I'll throw out a special ability if you want to know it. From 4th edition, all physical damage done to by an ant spirit in melee combat is considered acid damage. They are vulnerable to disruptions of the link between the shaman and queen, and the hive through the hive mind power. If the shaman is queen, or the queen is disrupted, or the ant spirit is contained behind a mana barrier, it becomes disoriented and gets penalties. So there's just a little bit about these stats of ant spirits. That. All right. Let's continue onward. There's plenty to talk about. Let's talk about locusts. They don't really have a hive in the traditional sense of it. They are a social group. They are a hive group. But they organize into these migrating swarms that are basically a mobile hive, traveling from place to place, ravaging and consuming everything in their area before moving on, halting only to reproduce or restore their numbers. They are as voracious and infamous as basically the biblical idea of the locust swarm is. Destroying farmlands, encouraging famine in remote areas like Australia, Central Africa, Central Asia. Local spirit swarms are assumed to be doing this kind of thing. There have been no survivors or confirmed accusations. And they are insatiable and can digest almost anything, given enough time. They have the power of flight and the power of devouring. Those are the 2 abilities a locust spirit would possess. They have a single-minded impulse to consume, and they do become oblivious to their surroundings when feeding. That's an advantage to smack out a horrible thing than if you have a chance. Excuse me. Anyway. Let's keep going. There's more to talk about. We talk about these. Let's talk about termites. They do have a cast very similar to that of ants. They're also adept at burrowing, and they work to build cement-hard mounds by mixing sand with their saliva to make a fast setting concrete-like material with unique properties, which is often then warded for extra protection. They are less territorial than ants, but they do fight ferociously to defend their territory. They prefer to build hives above ground, usually in abandoned human structures to avoid detection, unless they are in an isolated locale. They have a neat, tidy interior to their mound that is very strongly resemblant of an ant hive. The area outside the hive shows signs of their presence, discarded materials and scavenged remains of buildings. And they have the power of reinforcement. That's it for them. Pretty simple. Wasps. It's a descriptor for insect spirits that embody the essence and characteristics of several wasp-like species. Bees, wasps, hornets, basically anything that's kind of in that territory are under the wasp spirit gods. They organize by function and use social caste, but have the same 5 core types of spirits of all insect spirits. Of all insects. They're highly territorial, not overly intelligent, except for nymphs or caretakers who boost a malign intelligence. And they are especially predominant in their queen. Wasp soldiers appear like hornet-like spirits, workers resembling drones. They're far smaller than hives of other insect spirits, but cram a lot more spirits into a smaller area. They build on high places open to the air, such as upper stories of buildings and other towering structures. They have flight and the power of venom. And those are our group ones. We now have to talk about the solitary members of the entire group here. Because there is also some solitary ones. So, the thing about solitary insect spirits is they are more cunning and adaptable than the other counterparts. Because they don't have numbers like the social ones do. They have to rely on more, honestly, intelligence. They do sometimes establish nests to breed. They don't really have an attachment to the nest and can leave it at their will. At will. Only to the will of the... Well, subject only to the will of the shaman if one exists. Insect shamans who follow solitary insect mentor spirits usually feel compelled to summon one or more mothers. Mothers are capable of summoning other mother spirits, unlike queens, which makes solitary insect spirits much more adept at perpetuating their nest and significantly reduces the need for an insect shaman around. They also are classified by type, have less class organization. Different types often show different facets of the insect types they belong to. Beetle, cicada, firefly, fly, mantid, and roach are basic examples of solitary spirits. So beetles. Basically, beetle spirits are distinguished by their appearance. There are different types, but they all have very similar actions. They're all beetles, but they appear as different types of beetles. Soldier spirits appear as horned stag beetles. Workers are often more like scarabs. Scouts are more longhorn beetles. Caretakers are more like dung beetles. Nymphs or mothers usually appear as beetle subspecies. They dwell in or around nests overseen by one or maybe two mothers. They build tunnels in the damp and moist ground. Build their own nests rather than occupying existing spaces. Beetle spirits, especially males in quotation, are more aggressive than other insect types, even against their own kind, and tend to hunt alone. They are quite territorial and engage in sparring contests with other beetles. So, materialized beetle spirits possess a degree of tough chitinous armor. They increase their immunity armor by 4 against normal weapons, and consider to have a 4/4 armor against magical attacks. So they are very tough to fight. Cicada spirits have a small set of eyes wide apart in their head and transparent well-veined wings. They produce loud infernal buzzing using their abdominal membranes that can amplify the sound to over 100 decibels, which is equivalent to being inside a nightclub. They're agile and hardy. They have flight and the power of sonic projections. Firefly spirits appear as soft-bodied, elongated winged beetles that emit a yellow-green glow from their lower abdomen. They usually only glow when agitated or for communication reasons, or within a few dozen meters of firefly mother. They also flash when their nest mother or shaman is investing new spirits. They are known to be the least aggressive insect spirit species, favoring invasion to conflict when possible. Scouts and nymphs are far more common than soldiers or caretakers. They have flight and the power of confusion. Fly is basically a descriptor for a variety of solitary insect spirits that bear similarity to fly-like species. This oftentimes can be things like, nowadays, mosquitoes, gnats, midges, houseflies. I'll kind of go into the differences between editions for mentioning mosquitoes as their own thing in the older editions, which is a thing we can talk about here. They kind of put them together here in 4th edition. They're unclean scavengers living off the refuse of other species, having dark, humid, often pestilence environments. They're gregarious, self-sufficient, forming nests only to mate and feed. They're chaotic, noisy messes that reek with overpowering odor of refuse and garbage. They all have fly and the power of pestilence and immunity to disease. Yay. Let's hit up the second edition talking about mosquitoes separately. They do call them the vampires of the insect world. Long, sharp mouth parts. That's like a hypodermic needle. Piercing skin, draining blood. An insect here can drain all the blood of a full-grown troll in about 20 minutes. Of course, they gotta hold still. They prey on warm-blooded creatures they find sleeping or subdued, and and they keep sucking until the prey is dry. They deposit their cocoons in stagnant or still waters, commons to lakes and large pools. They usually move in swarms of 3 to 8, sometimes more, and gang up on single individuals. They find animal blood just as satisfying as humans. Dogs more often than not. The summoned insect spirit into a host body involves penetration of female singer into the host body, which is a symbolic act. But it's very horrifying to witness a giant spirit or mosquito plunging its thing into the host to like inject its essence in a new thing there. The most frightening thing about mosquito spirits is they weave a light cocoon over their host, which this minimum covering allows the mosquito to occasionally draw some blood or bodily fluid from the host. And they occasionally exchange fluid while doing this. The purpose it serves, unknown. That is specifically if we go to mosquitoes from 2nd edition. And we got 2 more to talk about. Aren't these so pleasant? They're very pleasant. Aren't you so loving of these things? Let's talk about mantids. They hunt other insects to consume their power and reproduce. Unusual for insect spirits, mantis always enforce gender selection in their vessel. A male, the caretaker or workers, primer persons to serve as mate, and then sustenance for females. Soldier scouts or nymphs. Leaders of a mantid grouping are normally snatched by the strongest soldier mantid. Leadership in the mantid group is always normally snatched by the strongest soldier, always female. Though rare, nymph mantids exist and possess unique status as a seer or oracle. While they do form nests, they do not have queens or mothers, instead possessing a single means of reproduction, eating other insect spirits. They're powerful because their ability to assimilate the force of other spirits to enhance their own. They're notoriously hard to control, and their shamans, exclusively women, are since they're able to reproduce without them. They tend to hide themselves among meta-humanity, becoming as much a part of it as their alien nature permits. All female, in quotations, mantid spirits possess the power of energy drain. Mantid drains force of other insect spirits by eating them. Force points consumed by the mantid in this manner are transformed at a 1-to-1 ratio into karma to improve abilities like free spirits do. Or stored in a astral womb. When enough accumulation is stored, force equal to the mantid's own, it gives birth to a fully grown mantid spirit equal to the force, which may then inhabit a living vessel. They prey on other insect spirits, but they're still honestly awful. Cockroaches. They're scavengers or omnivores that feed off all kinds of garbage. They build nests, not because they have to, because they like to. They cluster around a mother or shaman that birthed them, creating a nest. Several mothers can occupy a nest, but more than 3 rarely share a location. Like their terrestrial counterparts, they're the hardiest insect species capable of surviving under the most extreme conditions, even radiation. They're receive +2 die bonus on all damage-resistant tests. So, I talked about the 5 different types of insect spirits, and we'll talk a little bit here about their gender denotion because it's sort of a thing. We'll talk about it here. So, while all insect spirits have basically their hierarchies, nests or hives, they're basically assigned to one of 5 different spirit types. They're different than their elemental or arcane correspondents. their specialized functions in the insect world almost. Insects with wings can fly in their materialized forms. All of them can crawl along vertical surfaces when materialized. Insect spirits don't really have a real sex, an actual gender, as analogy is often made with the terrestrial counterparts or eusocial systems. In most species, soldiers, scouts, workers are considered male, while caretakers and nymphs, and queens and mothers are exclusively female. It might not affect the insect shaman's choice of vessel for inhabitations. Basically, it doesn't really matter in a lot of ways. They just kind of manifest this in the spirit sense, and they don't need it the same. It's very weird because they're alien creatures. They kind of do things like terrestrial creatures do, but they also don't, and it's kind of strange. But let's talk about the 5 types just a little bit. I'm not going to get their stats and abilities. Caretakers specialize in the care of the hive or nests. Spirits going through inhabitation, and the spirits going through inhabitation, the cocooning, and mutation process. They're less common in solitary insect species, but they're often found among roaches and beetles. They often create protective wards to defend their hive spawn from enemies and predators. Nymphs are juvenile queens or mothers. They're weaker, underdeveloped version of the insect's counterparts. They lack physical prowess and power, which they will possess when they metamorphose into a queen or a mother. But they have extensive use of all kinds of spell-like and phenomena-based abilities to distract and endanger potential enemies. Insect shamans usually prefer female vessels for nymphs. Scouts, spirits, of course, operate afar from the nest or hive to accomplish tasks, gather information, reconnaissance. They're spirits sent on a mission that do not require brute force of the soldier spirits. They're deployed as infiltrators, observers, and queens or mothers will attempt to produce flesh forms for scouts. Soldiers are the guards or defenders of the hive or nest. In solitary species, they're the hunters or predators. They have natural weaponry appropriate to the insects, mandibles, stingers, etc., and chitinous exoskeletons resistance to insecticides. And of course, workers are the most common type of insect spirits. They maintain and expand physical hives and require resources like food, heat, and new hosts. So the summoning and creation of a queen mother spirit requires a metamagic technique known as metamorphosis that is exclusively taught to insect shamans by their mentor spirits. Similar to ally conjuration or invoke metamagic, it transforms an ever already present nymph spirit into a queen or mother spirit. They must create a spirit formula, and then the ritual must be performed in a magical lodge with a force equal or greater to the desired force of the queen or / mother spirit. It's summoned following normal summoning rules. Its essence is channeled directly into the nymph, who emerges transformed into a queen or mother spirit with the abilities and powers of a queen or mother insect spirit. It's often called a true form nymph. It's always larger than human-sized version of the insect form. Usually 4 to 6 meters long. So a queen or mother insect spirit is very large, 4 to 6 meters long. And as soon as they emerge from the cocoon, they become the focal point of the hive or nest. It still operates functionally without her, but it is the focal point. It's a free spirit, no longer bound to the shaman that called it, unless the insect shaman uses their spirit formula to bind her. Because you can bind free spirits. Depending on the devotion to the insect spirit has to the mentor spirit, the shaman hands over the power or vies with the new queen or mother spirit for control of the hive. Normally this results in the elimination of the imputed shaman. Sometimes the queen mother and shaman enter a spirit pact out of mutual interest in raising power. An insect shaman can only ever summon one queen or mother spirit, as it is an avatar of their mentor spirit. Then they no longer require the shaman to summon new insect spirits from the deep metaplanes, as they can use their own astral gateway power. If they are disrupted, it is cast back to the deep metaplanes, and they must brought back by the insect shaman once again using the metamorphosis magic. If she's destroyed, the shaman is stripped of their magic, losing their magician or mystic magic adept quality, and becomes a mental emotional wreck. You can give them whatever kind of break that they have at that point in time. Any true force spirits linked to the Queen Mother via hive mind are disrupted if she's destroyed, while hybrid and flesh forms become permanently bewildered and insane. I'm not going to go into the insect spirit powers, but there are some there, and I think that kind of hits up on the majority of stuff we want to talk about when we talk about Insect City. But if you want to learn more about what they do, read up on Chicago, on what happened to it when it became a bug city. Or I recommend diving deeper into the Bug City book, which I talked about before. Because that book does hit up on not only insect spirits, but Chicago as a whole, and what happened to it. So, as you can see, bug spirits definitely have this kind of weird vibe to them. As Worm said there, it's very demon influence of like trying to possess someone, kind of like that stereotypical idealism of a demon or a devil, like seducing someone to power. And that's the beginning of the insect spirits. But it's then more akin to like an alien invasion, where these insect creatures consume the flesh of, honestly, victims, forming more of themselves into horrible monsters that then continue to spread and breed and try to infest the world. They are definitely a threat and monsters, and not to be taken lightly for their ability to, when these queens or mothers show up, and as long as they're honestly weak-willed individuals out there, you can easily find more insect shamans, more corrupted. Notice that's not just all magicians. You have to think about that shamans are more adept at spiritual connections. A magician does use magic and has some spiritual connections, but shamans are the ones that master conjuration a lot more than others. They are weak, in a way, to the influence of insect spirits. You don't hear much about magicians being influenced in it, because a magician, can just influence over magic, the traditional hermetic mage. And there are probably other traditions out there which might dive into spirit such a way that might have openings in their minds to insect spirits. But it is very unique and interesting that specifically those the shamanic beliefs are weak to them. They've opened up their minds so much more to the spirit worlds, to the metaphysical worlds, to the astral plane and the various realms, that these things can begin to feel them from deep within their realms. And once they sense their weakness, maybe someone is depressed, sad, angry, filled with hate, some form of negative emotion, some sort of problem, some kind of weakness that it can exploit. Because it's a monster that exploits weakness. And you probably have a few random madmen who speak out. Insect spirits, seeking power, villains. They're rare, and much more compared to the insect spirit found a shaman. Just a little bit more power. Just a little bit more strength. Something. And then the infestation begins. People die. Organizations built to help people in cities. That's where insect shamans came in. I think that's the darkest thing. Oh, we're going to help the homeless, the disenfranchised, refugees. What happens when a few of them disappear? Does anybody notice? And more disappear. And more insect spirits come out. In the Shadowrun world, we saw what happens when they get out of control. Chicago. The Bug City. It might be purged now, but the wounds and deaths that were there. There are movies about giant insects or media about creatures similar to them infesting the world. They're always kind of got this very dark horror to them, body horror, because they're using us as incubators, as food, or places for nests. It's in Shadowrun. It exists. And it's just as horrible as you think. Sting of a wasp into your abdomen as what's left of you gets crushed, burned, and something new emerges. Something horrible and insectile, ready to bring its destruction on you. Spread more of its kind. Insect spirits are that kind of like point that certainly fills some things. So they're interesting. And I think because they are such a danger, and there are things that are looking out for them, maybe that's why they're not as big of a threat yet. There's plenty of beings or people out there that try to fight against them, eliminate them. But how close are places in Shadowrun from degenerating down to that city I talked about in Earthbound? The one infested by insect spirits, where anyone suspected of being a spirit, possessed, or influenced by them, was slaughtered. Paranoia, fear, they run deep. The world of Shadowrun didn't get rid of that. They made it worse. And a lot of places in the world are probably one step away from murdering each other. Especially if another big outbreak like Chicago occurs. Chicago put people on edge. People learned about these things. You know people are afraid. You know they're afraid. Doesn't stop the weak-willed from still falling to them. Will never stop. And the hubris of plenty of people might not help, as we've seen with Ares. An infestation might be beginning on a much larger scale. Anyway, we can talk about all that all we want, but that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive, or this dive into insect spirits, learning about them. A lot of the books I recommend use them, talk about them here and there, but I would definitely recommend, if you want to dive into them yourself, Bug City is a great place to start with, especially if you want to have an idea of what it is to have a massive scaled infestation of bug spirits. And the Street Magic in 4th edition does a very good job of establishing them as stat-wise information. Stuff that's very usable in 4th and 5th edition games, which I'd normally recommend, but again, I don't know how much is in 6th edition. I can't say. I don't dive as much into 6th edition. I don't complain about it much, just not my cup of tea. But if it's not a bad system to use, so certainly there's probably adaptations to it. If you enjoyed this content, I do plenty of it. This entire month of October that I'm doing all these videos in will be kind of spooky, horror-related. Hope you enjoy them. But I do a lot of various tabletop-related content. The stuff that is live-streamed on Twitch, which we are doing right now, is up on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Usually after I do this, I get it up on YouTube a couple of days later. Tuesdays tends to be my random day. Thursdays tends to be the Pathfinder Galarian day, and Saturdays tends to be the World of Darkness day. That's the normal schedule. About 1 to 2 in the afternoon, if you're going to join me live in that area on Thursdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Saturdays, usually a little earlier in the morning, around 11 o'clock. I also do gaming streams, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, if you want to check those out. Other tabletop-related stuff. I do some live shows. We're currently off on them on the schedule, so I'll talk about them more in the future when more come up. And, of course, discussing tabletop Saturdays at 6 p.m. We talk about all the tabletop news of the week. Very great place to check. I recommend all this. Support, basically, easiest ways. If you're on Twitch, hey, follow would be nice. That's the easiest way to support. If you're on YouTube, subscription, ringing the bell to know when things are coming up, leaving a like. And the comment for today is, if you join me live, hey, have you had a game in Shadowrun where you dealt with insect spirits? Or insect shamans, or anything like that. Or maybe Chicago itself. There's a lot of interesting places related to this that we could have adventures. I certainly haven't used any in my adventures. I never actually planned on using insect spirits in any of my adventures that, went far or didn't go far. So, I've never done it, but, they're interesting enough that I've solved this. If you're looking for social media stuff, I have a Discord, a twitter.com. Make sure to check those out. Again, it's just a lot of scheduling when I'm going live, random thought patterns here and there, just occasional pictures of animals or something neat I see in the world, that kind of stuff. But, it has major updates. If anything's going on, that's the place to see them. Alright, I think I shout out everything I need to shout out. Look, we'll dive more into Shadowrun stuff more. Maybe we'll talk about Harlequin in the future. Maybe we'll talk about Chicago on its own video, just to get the history of that one. Who knows? But I hope you enjoyed learning. I hope you visit me again. And we'll talk more about Shadowrun. More spooky horror stuff in this Spooktober. But until the next time we talk and dive into these various topics, maybe you shouldn't trust your neighbors. Maybe you should. Who knows who's an insect spirit? Ready to cocoon you and change you on itself. Yeah. Also, don't distrust your